Hello, everyone. As Beth mentioned, I'm Aaron Longino with Thrive Student Loan Advisors. So, today we're going to try to touch on all things student loans. There's a lot of changes that are happening, a lot of questions that were brought up, a lot of things that next year won't be the same as they are this year. We're going to try to go as in depth as possible and explain those things to you today. So, today we'll cover a few things. We're going to try to talk about I'll briefly mention permanent tax-free employer student loan repayment. We'll speak about transitions from the SAVE plan to the recently created RAP plan. I'll try to dig as deeply as humanly possible with Parent Plus loans. These are one of the things that's been keeping me up at night lately is Parent Plus loans. Um, other changes with the current crop of qualified plans or income-driven repayment plans, and all things student loan forgiveness.
All right, Aaron, one quick one to start the day. Is there a cap on how old the loan is, and is there any grandfather clauses um, or chances that these new rules will be changed again soon?
So I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. I'll assume you're saying for a forgiveness program, not in the way you're asking. So in 2010, the Department of Education and the federal government got rid of the old student loan program, the FEFL program, FFEL, Federal Family Education Loan Program. Those loans don't qualify for anything we're going to talk about today, but they can be made to qualify. If you're someone that has loans prior to 2010, there's a whole world of federal student loan programs your loans do not qualify for. You may, as the borrower, but your loans will not. Have your loans reviewed. We'll take a look. We'll be more specific as if that applies to you and what it is you need to do in order to qualify. The recent budget bill is overhauling the student loan program. Let's take a step back. Under the previous administration, a new qualifying plan was introduced, the SAVE plan. Um, by all accounts, this plan was much more favorable for borrowers. It created a situation with millions upon millions of borrowers who could not afford monthly payments were now able to. The way this plan was calculated allowed for more reasonable payments. July 18th of 2024, the court said the Department of Education cannot unilaterally supersede the will of Congress. The way they recalculated the payments superseded the way Congress created student loan forgiveness, how qualified plans calculate payments for your monthly payments in order to qualify for forgiveness programs. In response to this, the recent budget bill eliminated all of the current crop of qualified plans for forgiveness programs. And they introduced a new RAP plan, which by all expert accounts will not be as favorable to borrowers as the current crop was, certainly not as favorable as SAVE. Even the way the plan is calculated will not be as favorable. What does that mean? It means the likelihood is federal borrowers who don't take action now, what payments will be much higher than they would have been if they grandfathered themselves into existing programs. The current crop of IDRs, as I mentioned, they're being phased out. Through a loophole, though, you are able to grandfather yourself through a loophole in that bill. Part of student loan forgiveness and part of what those plans did, student loan says if you make X amount of payments, whether it's 120, 240, or 300 payments for some, at the end of that repayment period, everything that's left is forgiven. The RAP plan changes that. What was 20 or 25 years for forgiveness will now be 30 years for student loan forgiveness. There will be no more 20 or 25-year forgiveness for those who do not act now. Parent Plus loans, they'll no longer qualify for forgiveness. The RAP plan Parent Plus loans are not eligible for the RAP plan, which will be the only qualified plan. There are things you'll be able to do. We'll speak about that a little more. So currently, the qualified plans, they use what the IRS calls your discretionary income to calculate your monthly payments. They take what you make in a year, your adjusted gross income plus your family size, the difference between that and 150% of the poverty line. They divide it by 12. That's your discretionary income. The qualified plans used to be between 5 and 20% of that number. RAP will only take adjusted gross income. That's it. So, in and of itself, just based on the calculation, payments will be significantly higher for Americans that don't take action now, for federal borrowers, I should say. Borrowers in the Save Plan borrowers and borrowers with Parent Plus loans, since the passage of the budget bill, this is what's been keeping me up at night. And we'll speak a little more specifically about that here in a moment. Those seeking student loan forgiveness or those who need to be on the path towards student loan forgiveness. Save, Parent Plus, and those seeking forgiveness are all the people that should be taking action now.
Sorry, Aaron. Can I stay in the same forbearance until it ends?
Can, yes. Should, no. So let's get into Save now. Anyone who's ever spoken to me or seen one of our webinars, they'll know I'm not a fan of the servicers. Servicers are those whom you make your payments to, your nail nets, your Ed Financials, your Mohilas, your CRIs. Those are the people who you make your monthly payments to. So nothing I'm about to say is any fault of borrowers. We literally pay the servicers tens of millions, tens of millions of dollars a month to service our student loans. And I'm of the opinion that they could care less. Mohila said in open court, student loan forgiveness is not in their best interest because they lose money. So essentially, your servicer has allowed you to waste over a year of qualified time, over 12 months. Getting qualified time for anyone who's ever tried is hard enough. So 8.8 million federal borrowers since July 18th of 2024 have wasted all that qualified time sitting in a Save forbearance. Interest has begun to accrue again. By most accounts, on average, about $350 a month. Not only that, for those who do not act now, the federal government will transition you out of Save into the RAP plan. Then you're stuck there. You can't go back. There's nothing you could do if forgiveness is your goal. You'll have to make those lower payments. If you're someone who does not qualify for student loan for public service loan forgiveness, now your path to forgiveness comes after 30 years as opposed to 20 or 25. If you are public service loan forgiveness, that may be the difference in being able to make affordable payments if someone takes action now, and that same person not being able to afford their monthly payment if they're transitioned into the RAP. So can you sit in the Save forbearance? Absolutely, you're able to. Interest will accrue, and the decision of which repayment plan you choose will be taken away from you. So you're able to, but it's likely not in your best interest. What is in your best interest is to take action now.
If I re-enroll in the RAP, will I lose my progress towards PSLF?
I assume what you're saying is when it's time to recertify, if you choose the RAP plan, no, you won't lose your progress in public service loan forgiveness. You're not supposed to. It isn't available now. So I haven't seen how to actually work. With the government, there's always how something is supposed to work versus how it actually does. Excuse me, but no. In theory, you shouldn't lose your progress. Whether or not you'll be able to afford your monthly payments is a different story.
And I should have said this outright. I've gotten a few questions that have come in. So our webinars, these are offered monthly at no cost. The loan reviews are also at no cost. So if you're here, your employer is offering this benefit to you, the loan reviews are at no cost. Now that's a one-time free loan review. If you are a returning guest, there is a small fee for a second review, but if you've never met with our advisors, those are at no cost, and we highly recommend you taking advantage of it because I know after this webinar, um, we kind of get these periods where there's not a lot of availability, but you will get in. So just, look at the calendar, make an appointment. It might be a couple weeks or a month out, but our goal is to get everybody in as possible.
Parent Plus loans on their own um, have never qualified for the forgiveness programs, but they always could be made to qualify. The recent budget bill, it's getting rid of the only plan Parent Plus loans were able to go into. Parents already got the short end of the stick, if you forgive the expression, when their only goal was to not allow their children to go into debt to educate themselves. I myself use Parent Plus loans for my oldest child. This is affecting me just as much as any other federal borrower. So what the budget bill did, Parent Plus loans to be made to qualify for forgiveness programs. Once they're made to qualify, there was only one of the qualified plans they were able to go to. It was 20% of discretionary income. You already, as a federal borrower with Parent Plus loans, were pigeonholed into the most expensive of the qualified plans. Now that plan is going away. It's being replaced by RAP. There's nothing you can do to make Parent Plus loans qualify for the RAP plan as you did with previous qualified plans. Meaning, and I cannot stress this enough, anyone who currently, right now, has Parent Plus loans, if you do not take action relatively soon, your Parent Plus loans will no longer qualify for forgiveness at all. Parent Plus loans, unlike undergraduate loans, undergraduate loans on average will double over the course of repayment because of interest before you're able to repay them. What you borrow will double as far as what you pay back. Parent Plus loans will sometimes triple, not even sometimes, on average, over the course of repayment. They'll be 3 times as high as what you borrowed. Forgiveness is usually the best path forward in order not to be making these payments for the rest of your natural life for some people. That will no longer be an option for those who have them that do not act now. Those who receive Parent Plus loans after July 1st of next year will have no options or no path towards forgiveness. Those who have them now still have an opportunity and closing window, rapidly closing window, but there's still opportunity there. Also, Parent Plus loans have now been capped at $20,000 a year and $65,000 for the lifetime of that student's education. On average, parents that use Parent Plus loans for all 4 years of their children's education normally would have about $150,000 worth of Parent Plus loans on average. This caps them at not even half of what your average family would need to educate their children. So not only will you no longer be able to have them forgiven if you do not act now or relatively soon, but also there'll be a cap on the amount of Parent Plus loans a parent is able to take for their children's education. My oldest daughter just started college last year. She just went into her second year of college. Last year and this year, I took out Parent Plus loans to help pay for her out-of-state tuition. Out-of-state tuition is sometimes twice as much as in-state. The goal was once she graduated to put those loans on a path to forgiveness. That is no longer an option. I'll be paying these back in full, whether they double or triple. Had they already been in repayment, I could safeguard them now towards that path, uh, on that path towards forgiveness. If you have Parent Plus loans, A, you know how expensive they can be. B, you know interest rates are always significantly higher than undergraduate loans. You yourself know how important that path towards forgiveness is for Parent Plus loans. If you do not act now or relatively soon, there will be no course for forgiveness of those Parent Plus loans. There will be no path towards forgiveness. I cannot stress this enough. If you have Parent Plus loans, have them reviewed sooner rather than later. This one keeps me up at night. I have to be honest. Parent Plus loans are hard enough for your average borrower to deal with as far as the programs they qualify for, the interest rates, the amount of monthly payments, if they're not placed into a plan that will allow forgiveness. Don't let that time period pass, or don't let that deadline pass where you're no longer able to enroll Parent Plus loans in the public service loan forgiveness or any forgiveness program for Parent Plus loans. Act now.
All right, Aaron, I'm going to give you two questions at once because we've got a bunch of questions that are kind of along these two themes. One is if I have a kid who's still in school graduating soon, what do you recommend? And two is for those in the SAVE program, how soon do they have to take action? What's the deadline?
SAVE plan, we've been transitioning our clients out of the SAVE plan since August of 2024. That's when you should have started to take that action. When should you do something? A year ago. As soon as you're able to, unless it's an affordability issue. If you cannot afford another plan and you're using a SAVE forbearance as a last resort because your payments will be unaffordable and you're no longer allowed to use forbearances the way you used to. You can only use them for 9 months at a time after the passage of the budget bill for every 24-month period. Then a SAVE forbearance for you, if you have no other option, you can't pay what you can't afford to pay. But for those who have options, for those who are able to make those payments, you need to take action now. You've already wasted over a year of qualified time, which is hard enough to get to begin with. We review loans all day, every day. I've probably reviewed over 10,000 loans. The people that are able to get qualified time on their own hovers between 1.5% and 2%. 98% of people that actually qualify for these programs, they never get them. Don't be a part of that 98%. As far as Parent Plus loans, it depends on what you mean by soon. If your child is graduating this year, if that's what relatively soon means, as soon as they're done with classes, be doing your exit counseling, letting the registrar office know you've done your exit counseling, and scheduling an appointment to have your loans reviewed. This window where you're able to safeguard Parent Plus loans into a forgiveness program is closing rapidly. As soon as they graduate or are about to graduate, you should already have taken that first step.
Okay, so we enticed everybody to come with a raffle. You had to register, provide a question, and attend. So we're going to pull our first raffle winner. I'm just going to tell your initials and the name of your employer. There's going to be two raffles today, one right now and one at the end of the webinar, and you're going to receive a $50 gift card. So the first winner's initials are CR from Summit Pathology. So congratulations. Hopefully you'll put that towards your loans and be $50 closer. So good job.
So again, the recent budget bill has kind of revamped or upended forgiveness programs as we know them. For those who do not qualify for public service loan forgiveness, forgiveness where it did come at 20 or 25 years will now come at 30. But a bit of good news is there was a hardship rule removed. There were some plans that people would price out of. They would make too much and no longer qualify for that plan, the plan that would keep their payments affordable. That was removed as far as the new RAP plan is concerned and the original qualified plan, which should help for higher income earners to get lower payments. Unfortunately, there wasn't also something to help keep payments lower for those on the opposite end of the income spectrum. But for those higher earners, this will help keep your payments affordable. Payments were beginning to either, or borrowers were either beginning to price out, or their wages would disqualify them from a particular plan, or their payments would just be astronomically high and they couldn't afford them either way. So the removal of the hardship rule should help with that for higher earners, or earners on the higher income side. Parent plus borrowers. Through a loophole in the budget bill, if action is taken before that transition to RAP takes place, there is a loophole to grandfather yourself into the original qualified plan where Parent Plus loans previously did not qualify for, which is why I cannot stress enough, action needs to be taken sooner rather than later, because that window is closing more and more every day. This will allow those with Parent Plus loans to still be on a path to forgiveness. Someone asked this question earlier. Yes, your payments towards public service loan forgiveness, once that transition happens, you will not lose any payments under RAP. The problem, or what worries most experts, is whether or not those payments will be affordable. It doesn't matter if you have 119 qualified payments out of 120 if you cannot make that last payment. I'm being a little hyperbolic with 119, but if you can't afford to pay what you can't afford to pay. But yes, you still will have your qualified time. Parent Plus loans, those on Save, or those on any of the current qualified plans, if affordability is a concern and forgiveness is a concern, action needs to be taken sooner rather than later.
I have an ICR plan and 87 payments qualify. I guess she's already made 87 payments. What do I need to do to stay on course? I'm about to retire. Does that make a difference?
That does make a difference, depending on how quickly you're about to retire. You're no longer qualify, excuse me, for public service loan forgiveness anymore. Additionally, income contingent repayment is one of the plans that are going away. You'll be a borrower who will be moved by the Department of Education into the RAP plan. In retirement, on top of that, a program or a plan that by all expert accounts will not be as affordable as the current crop. So you'll already have a plan that dictates higher, or requires higher payments, and you won't qualify for public service loan forgiveness anymore once you retire, which means your forgiveness would then come after 30 years as opposed to the normal 20. Um, you need to take action sooner rather than later. I would have my loans reviewed. If you have your loans reviewed, repeat the part about you're about to retire. Make sure that's taken into consideration with your loan review so that you can come up with a plan B in case you retire before you get, excuse me, 120 qualified payments.
I am set to resume paying on my loans in January. How long does it take to get approved for these plans?
That's not going to be approved. If you applied in January, so it probably says in review. It'll say that till the end of time. I've reviewed those loans that submitted something over a decade ago. It still says in review. That's just the Department of Education's way of saying they're never going to look at that. Something was wrong with it originally. It's harder to say. I don't have enough information to be more specific about what was wrong, but that's never going to go through. Now you run the risk of going into default. If you applied for it in January, you haven't made a payment since January. It only takes 9 months for your loans to go into default. That's a risk not worth taking. You should have your loans reviewed to see what the issue is.
Nelnet is telling me that the deadline for my IDR plan, you read this one, recertification has changed to December of 2026, and there will be no effect on my balances or forbearance. Is there any action I should take during this time?
Yes, I'm sure that's what NailNet says. They tell people a lot of things. But let's dig a little deeper. What does that mean? Recertification dates don't just change on their own. That means something is happening. It's very likely you're in a plan that's going away, and they need that time to transition you to the RAT plan. There may be better options for you now that you're able to grandfather yourself into, but they never give whole answers. Recertification dates don't arbitrarily change. There's a reason for that change that they're not telling you about.
So the person who said he was retiring has now said, I can stay working until public service loan forgiveness is done, which is great. Are there affordable plans?
Potentially have your loans reviewed and we'll see. I say potentially, you are able to grandfather yourself into the original qualified plan. By all accounts, it'll be much more favorable than RAP. But I've never reviewed your loans. I've never ran a projection. I don't want to just say yes. Then we run a projection, and your income is on a higher side, which means so are your payments. Have your loans reviewed. I'll be a little more specific to your loans, but in theory, yes. So when we say student loan forgiveness, what do we mean? Student loan forgiveness is a federal program in which direct loan borrowers, not Perkins loans, not Parent Plus loans, not FIFO loans, they all can be made to qualify, but on their own, they're not qualifying loans. The Department of Education says you make X amount of payments. It may be 120 for those that qualify for public service loan forgiveness. It may be 240 for those that take action now to safeguard their path to forgiveness, or it may be 360 payments for those who do nothing and allow the Department of Education to transition them to RAP. You have to repay those loans under a qualified plan, which is what we're talking about now. The RAP plan will be the new qualified plan or the existing income-driven repayment plans now. For those that qualify for public service loan forgiveness, there's the added benefit that you have to work for your employer. They'll say full time. It's not really full time. It's at least 30 hours a week on average. It can be cumulative between multiple employers, and you have to work for a qualified employer. Lastly, and I cannot stress this enough, 90% of people that mess up their qualified plans, they mess up because they do not recertify them. The servicers very often do not even tell people about recertification. Qualified plans technically are for 12 months at a time. They have to be recertified every year. If you do not recertify, you're technically not in a qualified plan. They'll take that price away from you and give you a standard repayment price, which is normally one of 3 repayment plans where you pay the most over the course of repayment. Recertification is necessary for qualified plans and also for public service loan forgiveness. So what are qualified plans? Essentially, they're income-driven repayment plans, payments based on your income and family size. As I mentioned, forgiveness comes after you've made your requisite number of payments, as long as you recertify that plan every year. If you do these things, then you're on the path to forgiveness. Public service loan forgiveness does have the extra benefit that you have to actually be enrolled into the program, which is another reason 98% of people that qualify for it never get it. They assume because they work for a qualified employer that they're in public service loan forgiveness. But it's more likely that you're not than you are in the program. Um, most people are not. Have your loans reviewed. We'll be very specific about your loans and what they need to do to be enrolled into the program. You're muted.
How do you know when it's time to recertify?
I would love to say, oh, your servicer sends out notifications. They'll make sure that you know to recertify. But the truth is, more often than not, they don't. When you first enroll into your qualified plan, you get a plan letter. It tells you when your first payment is due. that's when your plan ends the next year for 12 months at a time. If your plan begins October the 1st, then it's very of this year, then it's very likely it expires in September of 2026. This is not something traditionally the servicers are very helpful with. So you want to make sure either yourself or your student loan advisor keeps up with it for you.
I'm in an IDR plan. I never went into the save. I've been paying monthly towards PSLF. Do I just have to recertify or am I supposed to go into the RAP plan? I will be forgiven in 2026 or 2027 as it stands now.
I don't know if I understand that question, but yes, you have to recertify every year. I'm not sure if I understood what you meant for the rest of it. Um, but if you're in an IDR, it's very likely that plan is going away. You should have your loans reviewed and see if there's any options uh, before RAP takes place. So when we talk about qualified plans, this is a prime example. Everyone, when they get that first bill in the mail, when their loans go into repayment, they assume that's what their student loan payment is. This is what they have to pay. But that's just a default plan, a standard repayment. As I mentioned, it's usually one of three plans where you pay the most over the course of repayment. This is an example of that. This is your average borrower, is a family of five with about $50,000 of student loan debt, and they make roughly about $55,000 a year adjusted. Um, on the left, you'll see just the standard repayment or the default repayment plan. This borrower would be expected to pay $530 a month for a family of five, regardless of the income. That's on the higher side for a family of five in this economy. Over the course of repayment, this borrower would be expected to have paid over $63,000, even though they only borrowed 50. And that's on the lower end. Student loans will typically double over the course of repayment. And this is over the course of a 10-year repayment, although I very rarely see people in a standard repayment that are able to repay them over the course of 10 years. But that is how the monthly payment is calculated. On the right, you'll see a qualified plan. That same borrower, all things being equal, where the standard or default plan was paying over $500 a month, this borrower's payment in a qualified plan would only be $10 a month. The Department of Education builds in a 5% cost of living increase annually in your projections year to year. Although this isn't the 1960s, nobody gets a 5% raise annually, or very few people. But at the end of their repayment period, they would only be expected, their payments would only have been expected to increase to $18 a month. Over the course of repayment, they would have only paid $9,675, over $50,000 less than the same borrower on a standard repayment. But this borrower would have over $62,000 forgiven, currently federally tax-free. That's the difference in qualified plan for public service loan forgiveness and just this default standard repayment. You don't want to be caught paying over $50,000 more necessary if you don't have to. Have your loans reviewed and make sure you're in a qualified plan.
If I work for an employer that qualifies for public service loan forgiveness, but I never signed up for it, will it backdate to when I started with the company?
That isn't normally how public service loan forgiveness works. You normally have to begin a program from day one when both you as the borrower and your loans qualify. We'll speak a little more extensively about ways that you are able to. There are some instances when we're able to get that time, and we'll be more specific as we move along. But there are some instances we would have to look at your loan, see when they were dispersed, the loan types, so on and so forth. But sometimes there's a way to get that time retroactively. Sometimes. So this is another illustration. This person does not qualify for public service loan forgiveness. On the left, it's just the standard default repayment. Same rules apply. But on the right, this borrower does not qualify for public service loan forgiveness, which means depending on when they enter this program, if they take action now and they're safeguarded against what's coming, there's a possibility of still a 20-year repayment until your loans are forgiven. But under the current rules, since the budget bill passed, student loan forgiveness for non-public service loan forgiveness will come after 30 years, 360 qualified payments for those that don't take action now. So while your monthly payments are only $10 a month and are only expected to get as high as $18 a month, that borrower would have paid $43,200 as opposed to the $9,000 with the person that qualifies for public service loan forgiveness, because they'll now be in repayment for 20 years longer than they had to be. 10 years longer if they don't qualify for public service loan forgiveness. Now there'll still be over $20,000 left at the end of your repayment period that would be expected to be forgiven. So the forgiveness is still there. For those that don't qualify for public service loan forgiveness, you run the risk of not only paying more over the course of repayment, but having to pay 10 years longer. Nobody wants to pay their student loans 10 years longer. No one told us when we were 18 years old, just trying to educate ourselves and follow that path towards the American dream, that your loans would double over the course of repayment. They would triple. Even in a 10-year window, you pay tens of thousands more than what you borrowed. Over the course of 20 and 30 years is even more dramatic, but you are still able to get that forgiveness and a 20-year window for most if action is taken before the Department of Education does it for you. Back in May, there was a lot of conversation about defaulted loans. The offset program or off ramp ended. What does that mean? Beginning in March of 2020, due to COVID-19, student loans for all federal borrowers went into forbearance. For virtually all federal borrowers went into forbearance. Once loans went back into repayment, they were not yet reporting missed payments to credit agencies. They were not yet allowing students to go into delinquency. That's when you don't make a payment for 90 consecutive days. They were not yet allowing student loans to go into default. That's when you don't make a payment for 270 consecutive days or 9 months. Taking me back to that borrower that asked the question about them submitting something in January that still hasn't gone through. If your loans are in repayment, that's a 9-month window. Your loans will go into default. What does this mean? When your loans go into default, you are no longer with the Department of Education, or your loans are not, I should say. They're now with a collection company. This collection company is charging you 24% interest, 18% compounded every single day. On top of that, you lose your federal privileges, meaning you're no longer able to get federal student loans, meaning if you're someone who receives an income tax return during tax season, they'll take that income tax return. They'll say they're offsetting it, but they're taking the whole thing. And usually they're only applying between $5 and $50 to the interest of your loans. And that is not the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is what happens next. Garnishment is the last stages of default. This is an actual judgment against you in a court of law. They'll take 15% of every taxable income that you receive: employment income, Social Security income, unemployment income, most investment income. There was a recent article that estimated upwards of 4 million borrowers will have their Social Security garnished because of defaulted loans. And that's just Social Security. That isn't the tens of millions of federal borrowers who will soon not be able to make their monthly payments because of changes to repayment programs. If your loans are in default, that is always our primary concern, always above all other things. Don't fall into garnishment. It's extremely difficult to get out of and extremely expensive to get out of. Lawyers typically charge between $3,000 and $5,000 And that's here in Ohio. I can only imagine what they charge in some of the bigger markets like New York and California. Don't get caught in default. So there is a program for those who qualify for public service loan forgiveness that perhaps may have missed the public service loan forgiveness waiver in 2022 and 2023, or the one-time account adjustment in 2023 and 2024 that were able to convert non-qualified time into qualified time. It's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Buyback Program. It was supposed to be for all student loan forgiveness, but unfortunately, politics does play a part in Washington, and they're only doing it now for public service loan forgiveness. For those, it appears as if they're only doing it for people not in SAVE. But how the program is supposed to work is essentially you're telling the Department of Education, look, my loans were in forbearance or they were in a deferment for this period of time. I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to get them out of deferment or forbearance, but I would like to buy this time back. Or maybe they were not in a qualified plan, whatever the case was, other than default, that you were not able to make qualified payments. The Department of Education can calculate a monthly payment, and however many months you're trying to buy back, they'll allow you to buy that back in one lump sum payment. The reason I say I'm not sure if they're doing it with people that were in SAVE, through a Freedom of Information Act and a recent court proceeding, we found out only 1% of borrowers that were in a SAVE plan have even got a response back about a buyback program. Sometimes the government, as I'm sure everyone here knows, they don't say things explicitly, but you have to watch for what they're actually doing. It doesn't appear as if they're doing buybacks for SAVE, but it could be they just had so many they haven't gotten around to it yet. But the buyback program will allow you to convert non-qualified time into qualified time in one lump sum payment. It's an excellent program. Sometimes it's the difference to people at the finish line or across the finish line for 120 qualified payments. If you think a buyback may work for you, have your loans reviewed, and we'll be very specific as to will it, or if a temporary extended public service loan forgiveness request is more to your liking, which actually was a really good transition. So a temporary extended public service loan forgiveness application was created because 98% of people that actually qualify for this program never get it. Most people that have their loans forgiven through public service loan forgiveness is actually through a TEPSLF. You're petitioning the Department of Education and saying, for whatever reason, X amount of payments, these 20 payments weren't qualified payments. I was not in a qualified plan, or I made late payments, or these payments were partial payments when I thought I had a different payment amount. And the Department of Education, without you having to pay anything extra versus the buyback program, will convert those non-qualified payments, they have to be actual payments, into qualified payments. This is the biggest tool in getting, one of the biggest tools in getting loans forgiven through public service loan forgiveness. Even if you've been denied before for public service loan forgiveness, see if a TEPSLF will work for you. Speaking of being denied and 98% of qualified borrowers not receiving their forgiveness, there's almost always the usual suspects. As I mentioned, me personally, this is my opinion, I'm not a fan of the servicers for the things I've seen them do to borrowers. They're also, in my opinion, the biggest hurdle to student loan forgiveness. As I mentioned, Mohila, who at one point in time was the only servicer that had the ability to hold public service loan forgiveness loans, said in open court on the public record for any and all to see that student loan forgiveness is not in their best interest because they lose money when loans are forgiven. They don't actually lose money. They're paid, all of the servicers are paid by the number of loans they hold and service. So if a loan is forgiven, you haven't actually serviced this loan. That's not losing money. That's not having earned it. But I guess in today's society, those two things are synonymous with one another. So in our experience, the servicers are usually the biggest hurdle to student loan forgiveness as far as the information they give out. But there are other issues, administrative administrative difficulties, which usually is when politics get involved, one administration over another, different political philosophies value and prioritize different things. But you also have borrower qualifications. As I mentioned all the time, and I always will, you as the borrower may qualify for forgiveness, but your loans do not. Don't assume you're in a forgiveness program. Make sure that you are. If you're unsure, it's a QR code right there. Have your loans reviewed, and one of our borrowers will go over that with you in great detail. So, speaking of our advisors, what is it exactly that we're able to do to help? The first thing we're going to want to do, if you haven't noticed, is to review your loans. We'll give you an honest assessment. Um, we'll tell you what you could be paying versus what you're currently paying. We'll run a projection based on the suggestions that we make. We'll tell you exactly when your loans should be forgiven, if they're forgivable, how much you'll have to pay to get there, and how long you can expect to still have to make those payments. Also, one of the biggest things we do is ongoing services, recertifications for your plan, annual verifications for public service loan forgiveness, and all things federally student loan related. You cannot imagine how many people are not no longer eligible for any forgiveness program simply because they never recertified their plan. 90% of people that mess up their qualified plan is because their servicer never told them about a recertification date. Literally 8 out of 10 people that I speak to have never even heard of recertification. So it's not just the normal things, loan consolidation, income driven repayment plan enrollment, or just affordable payments, period, whether they're qualified payments or not. But the ongoing services will allow us to make sure year after year you're always in the best plan possible. If your loans are in default and collections, we'll be right there with you to get them out, or we will put you on a where they won't go into default. If you qualify for a discharge, a closed school discharge, which that window is closing as well, that's one of the things they're getting rid of, or they're just simply not discharging the loans. We'll help you with that. Parent Plus loans, I will not stop speaking about Parent Plus loans and those on the SAVE plan. You need to take action now. And more than half of my day personally is spent going year by year, month by month, finding non-qualified time that should be qualified. For that person that asked if they're able to get past periods of employment, I try to speak carefully. I need to look at your loans and see a few things, but I will say this: if there's qualified time to be had, we'll find it for you. Whether we have to go month by month over the course of the last 10 or 20 years, we'll find that qualified time. That's what we specialize in.
We've gotten a lot of questions. I'm going to wrap it up into one. Here's the QR codes to use your phone, and you can sign up for a meeting. The only thing you need to bring with the meeting is if you have your studentaid.gov login, that is how Aaron and his team will be able to see your loan at the source and not through the servicer who doesn't always have all the accurate information. If you have a quick question, you can email me. I'll forward it on to one of our advisors. Aaron's direct Calendly link is right here. If you want to type it in, I think the QR codes are easier. And I know we didn't get to a ton of questions, and I apologize. This was just a massive group today, which is great, and also tells us that there are so many questions and so many really, nervous borrowers, and we get it because there's major changes. And like Aaron has said over and over again, you got to act now or you will lose out on some of these benefits, and that just isn't that beneficial for any of you. So lastly, our third, now that we had a good joke raffle winner is initials are MAK from Hewlett Packard. So congratulations to you, and also thank you all for being here today. We hope that you got something out of it. For those of you who aren't quite understanding of the QR codes, just email me and I will forward you on to our advisors to set up a review. And oh boy, they just keep coming in. So please set up a time to talk with our advisors. All your individual questions will get answered, we promise. And we host these every month. So the link you used today, you can also sign up for any future webinars. Each one's a little bit different based on kind of what's happening then, rule changes. So, please feel free to participate in all of our webinars. You can share the link if you've got family members that have loans as well, or friends that have federal student loans. Everybody is welcome. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Erin. That was great. And have a great rest of your day. Take care.